Hello, students. This is section 2.2, early human migration. So the last section you guys talked about the first people, so the early hominids, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and then us, Homo sapiens. You also talked about hunter-gatherers and those societies, and we also looked at, let's see, the Iceman. So now we're going to move on to early human migration. Migration simply just means moving from place to place. If you migrate, you move. Okay, some people move, sometimes animals move, birds move, all those things. Okay, so the way the chapters are broken up, if you've already read, you'll notice there's main ideas right here, there's key terms down to the left, and then there's usually a question called if you were there, and it kind of just to generate some thought. And then it'll give a little building background and it'll go into the reading. So I always like to start with the main idea, what you will learn. So the main idea is people moved out of Africa as the Earth climate changed. People adapted to new environments by making clothing and new types of tools. I'm right here on the left. The big idea is as people migrate around the world, they learn to adapt to new environments. Okay, the key terms are migrate, ice ages, land bridge, and the Mesolithic era. If you were there, it says, your tribe of hunter gatherers has lived in this place for as long as anyone can remember, but now there are not enough animals to hunt. Whenever you find berries and roots, you have to share them with people from other tribes. Your leaders think it's time to find a new home in the lands far beyond the mountains, but no one has ever traveled there, and many people are afraid. How do you feel about moving to a new home? Well, I'm sure some of you have already probably moved at least once in your life, but it's sometimes it's a little scary because you may not know anybody, you don't know what the town, what the school, if you're going to make any friends, okay? And these people, could have been afraid too, but you have to remember back then at this point they had to go kind of where the food was. Okay, so they had to go where they could hunt animals, where they could gather berries, and once that sort of ran out, they had to kind of move to a new place. Okay, so let's go to the building background. It says, from their beginnings in East Africa, early humans moved in many directions. Eventually, they lived on almost every continent in the world. People probably had many reasons for moving. One reason was a change in the climate. So, climate, we're usually talking about the weather patterns in a certain area. So, sometimes people move because it's too cold. Sometimes people move because it's too hot. So, and again, those things could also affect the available food in the area. So if it's too cold, not a lot of animals are going to be around, or if it's too hot, only certain animals can live in that kind of climate. So people had to move to find these things, to find food and to find shelter. Okay, let's go to people move out of Africa. It says during the Old Stone Age, climate patterns around the world changed, transforming the Earth's geography. In response to these changes, people began to migrate or move to new places. The Ice Ages. Most scientists believe that about 1.6 million years ago, many places around the world began to experience long periods of freezing weather. These freezing times are called the Ice Ages. The Ice Ages ended about 10,000 years ago. During the Ice Ages, huge sheets of ice covered much of the Earth's land. These ice sheets were formed from ocean water, leaving ocean levels lower than they are now. Many areas that are now underwater were dry land then. For example, a narrow body of water now separates Asia and North America. But scientists think that during the ice ages, the ocean level dropped and exposed a land bridge, a strip of land connecting two continents. Land bridges allowed Stone Age peoples to migrate around the world. So a land bridge. Let me just show you this picture right here. Right here is North America. We're right down over here. This is Asia. So this is called the Bering Strait. If you went to the Bering Strait now, you can ride a boat right through here, right through this area. However, what these scientists think is during these ice ages, the water levels drop so much, okay, because of these freezing sheets of ice, it dropped the level because so much ice formed that it exposed these land bridges right here. A land bridge is just the area that where the water level drops. Now people can walk across. If you've ever been to a lake in the sometimes during a drought season where the water levels drop so much and you can see all sorts of things, mounds and sometimes trees popping up out of the water. Think of it kind of like that. When the water levels drop in a lake, it exposes certain things. Just like when the water levels dropped during the ice ages, it exposed many land bridges, and they think that's how people went across. Okay, so this is kind of the theory right here, where it says early humans first left Asia, left East Africa about 100,000 years ago. This is what they think, and then migrated into Asia. So they moved, went over to Europe over here, came into Asia, then I think down to Australia here, and then this way, sort of eastward. Eventually, they think they crossed this land bridge and came to North America, and eventually, finally, down to South America. Now, whenever you read a map in this book, it's going to have a couple things. It's going to have a title. Okay, so what does this map show? This map shows early human migration, according to the title up here on the left. This is called a compass rose. It shows the directions, shows north, east, south, and west. Um, it also shows a legend right here. So the red arrow represents what? Well, possible migration routes. Dates represent approximate number of years ago. The bluish area represents glaciers, and the kind of brownish area represents approximate land area during the ice ages. Okay, so before I go into the next part, I'm going to show you a quick little video that's it's kind of similar to what this shows, but shows it in a video format. So go ahead and sit back and let me sort of share that with you. And again, the dates may be a little bit different. Again, this is theories. These are best guesses, but I thought it was really good because it kind of showed the direction that these people move in. So that's us. So the last part mentioned what's called the agricultural revolution. That is for the next chapter, and we'll save that information for that time. Okay, so again, that video basically showed this. So let's go on to settling new lands. It says scientists agree that migration around the world took hundreds of thousands of years. Early hominids, the ancestors of modern humans, migrated from Africa to Asia as early as 2 million years ago. From there, they spread to Southeast Asia and Europe. Later, humans also began to migrate around the world, and earlier hominids died out. Look at the map to see the dates and routes of early human migration. Humans began to migrate from East Africa to Southern Africa and Southwestern Asia around 100,000 years ago. From there, people moved east across Southern Asia. They could then migrate to Australia. Scientists are not sure exactly how the first people reached Australia. Even though ocean levels were lower then, there was always open sea between Asia and Australia. From southwestern Asia, humans also migrated north into Europe. Geographic features such as high mountains and cold temperatures delayed migration northward into northern Asia. Eventually, however, people from both Europe and southern Asia moved into that region. From northern Asia, people moved into North America. Scientists disagree on when and how the first people arrived in North America. Most scholars think people must have crossed a land bridge from Asia to North America. Once in North America, these people moved south, following herds of animals and settling in South America. By 9000 BC, humans lived on all continents of the world except Antarctica. Okay, the next section is called People Adapt to New Environments. So we say the word adapt, you guys might know what that means. So when you adapt to something, it means you have to sort of change the way you approach it. For instance, if you lived in a really cold weather environment and then you moved here to Brentwood, you're probably not used to these hot summers. So you'd have to adapt a little bit. Okay, you have to buy some shorts. Okay, buy some t-shirts, buy some flip-flops. Okay, and conversely, if you move to a cold weather environment, it might be a little harder for some of us. Like if we move to, oh, I don't know, North Dakota or something like that, we would definitely have to adapt. We'd have to probably go out and buy some warm clothes, buy some thermals, buy a warm hat, okay, some gloves, okay, many layers of clothes because it's really, really cold there, especially in the wintertime. And, us Californians, we're kind of wimpy, so we don't do well in cold weather. So we would definitely have to adapt. All right, it says, as early people moved to new lands, they found environments that differed greatly from those in East Africa. Many places were much colder and had strange plants and animals. Early people had to learn to adapt to their new environments. Clothing and shelter. Although fire helped keep people warm in very cold areas, people needed more protection. To keep warm, they learned to sew animal skins together to make clothing. In addition to clothing, people needed shelter to survive. At first, they took shelter in caves. When they moved to areas with no caves, they built their own shelters. The first human made shelters were called pit houses. They were pits in the ground with roofs or branches and leaves. Later, people began to build homes above the ground. Some lived in tents made of animal skins. Others built more permanent structures of wood, stone, or clay or other materials. Even bones from large animals such as mammoths were used in building shelters. New tools and technologies. People also adapted to new environments with new types of tools. These tools were smaller and more complex than tools from the Old Stone Age. They define the Mesolithic era or the Middle Stone Age. This period began more than 10,000 years ago and lasted to about 5,000 years ago in some places. During the Middle Stone Age, people found new uses for bone and stone tools. People who lived near water invented hooks and fishing spears. Other groups invented the bow and arrow. So before I move on, so these periods, so like the Old Stone Age, the Middle Stone Age, or the Mesolithic, and then we'll get to the Neolithic, the New Stone Age era in the next section. They're pretty much defined how people used tools and how people adapted and got food and shelters and things like that. So that's kind of how these eras were are sort of defined. This is called a primary source. We're not going to read this at this time, but a lot of times in the book we'll refer to these called primary sources where it has like quotes from people or quotes from actual documents. Okay, so you do have to know the difference between a primary source and a secondary source, and we'll talk more about that later. Okay, the last page. Well, first of all, they mentioned housing, how people had shelters. This is one way they did. They built things called mammoth houses. It says early people used whatever was available to make shelters. In Central Asia, where wood was scarce, some early people made their homes from mammoth bones. It says heavy mammoth bones were used as a frame for the shelter. That looks pretty sturdy. And the frame was probably covered with animal hides to form a solid roof and walls. So not bad. It's a really good use of the bones, especially this little arch here. And they made a roof and they covered it so they had some shelter. So very good use of the mammoth bones. And finally, we'll finish up the section. It says, in addition to tools, people develop new technology to improve their lives. For example, some learn to make canoes by hollowing out logs. They use the canoes to travel on rivers and lakes. They also began to make pottery. The first pets may also have appeared at this time. People kept dogs to help them hunt and for protection. Developments like these, in addition to clothing and shelter, allow people to adapt to new environments. Okay, and then at the end, there's usually a little summary and preview. So, like you guys have done summary writing. These are pretty short, though. It says, early people adapted to new environments with new kinds of clothing, shelter, and tools. In section 3, that's the next one, you will read about how Stone Age peoples developed farming. All right, at the end of each section, it says there's a section called assessment, section 2, assessment. So these are some of the questions, like for instance, define what is a land bridge, analyze why did it take so long for people to reach South America, what did people use to make tools in the Mesolithic era, and why did people have to learn to make clothes and build shelters. And then sometimes there's a question for under critical thinking. It says sequencing. Draw the graphic organizer below, completed to show the order of human migration around the world. So it might be dependent on your teacher. Your teacher may have you write these out. Maybe they'll give them to you in a Google Doc. Sometimes you may just discuss them. Okay, just sort of be aware. And we usually don't do the focus on writing, although sometimes we do. But just kind of focus on these questions. Sometimes it's a good idea to read these questions ahead of time before you read the chapter or before you listen to the chapter, just so you kind of know the answer. Okay, well that is section 2, and in there should be an ed puzzle, so make sure you answer all the questions, and that's it, and we'll see you next time.